Thank you for tuning into the Hacking the Patriarchy podcast. I'm your fervent feminist host, Raven O'Neill, and I get the honors of sitting down with women experts from all walks of life to discuss the ideas, opportunities, and the strategies that women can take advantage of to get ahead in our patriarchal society. So, if one of your love languages is learning how to hack patriarchal systems and structures, I invite you to join us and help move the needle. I'm excited to welcome today's guests, Kim Havens and Noah Ries, co-founders and co-CEOs of Kahila. These two extraordinary women bring more than 30 years of combined professional experience and a powerful mission to transform how we think about representation in the business world. Kim spent nearly 2 decades in commercial real estate development, including at the vice president level, building communities from the ground up. Noah brings a remarkable track record as a serial entrepreneur who has spent over 15 years creating high-impact communities. Together, they've created Kahila, an award-winning platform that's not just talking about change, but actively driving it. Please give a very warm welcome to Kim and Noah. I want to give a warm welcome to Kim and Noah. I'm so excited to have this conversation today. I think a great starting place is to look at how and why you ladies jumped into fundraising.
Great. Thanks for having us.
So excited. Thank you, ladies, for joining.
So I'll jump in here. So in the fall of 2018, Noah and I had gotten to a place in both of our careers, and we had been chit-chatting about basically we've had these very different journeys in our lives and in our careers. And what we both recognized is we had done a lot of personal and professional development. And it had been a real game changer for both of us. And we happened to meet at kindergarten drop-off with our 2 daughters, our eldest daughters, and we saw this kindred spirit. And so we had started talking about different ideas and things we were doing. We knew we were both in this a bit of a transition. And so that fall of 2018, we were starting to test and research, but what we wanted to do is launch a community for women. So very specifically, a community for women who are like us, who are in the middle of their career. They were juggling families. They were getting a bit stuck and frustrated. And again, the 2 of us had leaned into our personal and professional development, which really transformed our mindsets. So we said, how do we do that? It's super expensive, right? Either you're paying out of pocket or your company's paying, which means you got to be really senior to get that paid for by your company. And that means most people don't have access, and specifically most women don't have access because they are not breaking the VP level in corporate America. So we launched what is today Kahila in January 2019. We came out with our first thing, which was actually a combination of in-person and digital community. And it was specific to women middle of their career.
When we launched Kahila was to help, at the time, individuals to really have a sense of self-agency and self-authorship. We actually made a pretty big pivot at the end of 2019 where we decided to go B2B and become a fully digital platform. Somewhat serendipitous in nature because in 2020, everyone went digital once the pandemic began. The reason we decided to go B2B was, we realized that we wouldn't be able to boil the ocean. We wouldn't be able to make an impact 50 people at a time coming to these events that we were hosting. But also we were perpetuating the problem where only those who were privileged enough to be able to pay for it out of pocket or get reimbursed by their companies, they still had to be privileged enough to be able to pay for it out of pocket to begin with. And so we decided to go directly to the companies. And what we saw was a huge opportunity where there was a tremendous amount of investment happening in the corporate space for learning and development, and yet really no momentum. The statistics were still showing that women and underrepresented minorities, people of color, were woefully underrepresented in terms of senior leadership. And that those individuals who did have access to personal and professional development were able to climb the corporate ladder so much more effectively, so much more happily. And we really created this new iteration of Kahila to change that paradigm. And we saw a tremendous amount of opportunity, which is probably a good segue into why did we decide to then go after funding?
Yeah. So We actually went after funding twice. The first time did not work, and we decided to turn it off. So I'll start with, in that fall of 2019, as we were making the switch to be a B2B product, a company, and signing up our first huge pilot contract with a Fortune 500 company, which was amazing. And we were doing all of that, and we realized, oh my goodness, there are also some amazing companies out there. The Wing, if you remember back in the day, Chief was out there all in person. There was a lot happening in the female community space. And so we had this inclination, like, we had been bootstrapping it, up to then. And we said, oh my gosh, let's go test the waters. Could we get some funding? We had no Rolodex. We didn't actually have our first contract fully signed yet. It was a very hard conversation. We just got really scrappy and started calling around. And ultimately, we decided it was a distraction. So we stopped and said, you know what? We signed that big contract. That is going to take, again, back to the bootstrapping. That's going to take us a good chunk of the way. So let's just keep going and see if we can keep creating more revenue for ourselves. As we all know, in March of 2020, when COVID really hit us, it helped our business as our major pilot client moved everybody home and the rest of the world moved home. We were able to support them even more. They thought it was a 6-month pilot, but it basically very quickly became a 2.5-month pilot that expanded over and over. So that's sort of, the path that we went on. We did not look up. We did not think about funding until 21. And so I think it was about the spring of 21, we said, we should think about this to continue. What do we need to continue scaling? And we had continued to bootstrap. We were, using that cash that was coming in to fund the business. And we really needed a little more gunpowder in the business. And so that's when we went out. I will say the one thing we did back in 2019 that helped us set the stage for 21 is we did get connected with its ASU GSV Cup. So there's a big VC competition. It's a conference and a competition. It's basically through Arizona State University and GSV, the large VCs. And they've come together and they do this amazing competition. And so we made the finals, basically. And then it was the same thing, COVID hit. And so we never got to present live, but we did our pitch. And that allowed us to meet more VCs and actually start to understand what that world was. So in 21, when we saw the real growth of the HR space, we were doing well and we saw a lot of competition started to raise funding. We realized we were very nervous we would get run over, right? And we would sort of just be crushed by the competition. So using what we had learned, which was still pretty small, we again went back, got super scrappy. We looked at our who did we know and started making those phone calls. So got as much advice as we could. We actually, it was through a contact through the GSV who said, hey, do you know about this list that's floating around the World Wide Web and is specifically called the No Warm Intro Needed. And it is a list that VCs and large angel investors put their name on. And it says, what do they invest in? What round? Is it a pre-seed, seed? What, sort of what size? What is their focus? And you can go, and so they all are putting their names out there to the world, their contact info, and you can sort through this big list, which we would never have found, right? It just didn't pop up in Google search. That list was what set us up really to go through our fundraising. And it was pretty amazing. And we cold emailed every appropriate person on that list, which was probably 60. It was about 60 leads. And we worked our way through it. I'll pause there.
First of all, congratulations, because fundraising is never easy. It's even harder as a woman. So you had mentioned that the competition was an entry point. I feel like fundraising, when you first start out, you really have no idea where to start. So really not even knowing where to start, what would you say were your very first steps besides the competition? Was it just asking within your network? What were your very first initial steps?
I think it was understanding what is the total addressable market size? So are we doing something that we feel like there's a huge amount of opportunity for, that this feels like it could be, if somebody gave us $5 million, that we could 10x their investment. So that was first looking at objectively, do we feel like we have a very scalable business here? The reason we said yes was we had already repeated our business. So we'd gotten that first Fortune 500 client. By the time it came to 2021, we had managed to replicate and close several other clients. And so we were then able to zoom out and look at, okay, well, what's the size of the market? What's the niche that we are in? What's the problem and how are we solving it? And so being able to really be self-critical in answering those questions is really important. And then in the process of applying for the ASU GSV Cup, they had a really strict format and helping get clarity for us in answering the questions. It was the 4 Ps. So it was the problem, the people, I forget what the other 2 were, but you could Google it. And answering those 4 Ps helped us get really clear on, do we have a story here? Do we have a business that VCs would want to back? And we had to go through that process first of getting clear on, why are we the right people to solve that problem? What is the problem? How do we solve it? And is it scalable?
Let's fast forward a little back to that list, because I think you said 60 people on the list at least. And I feel when fundraising starts to take place, you obviously learn by failing and the mistakes, but something I learned along the way is that you really should pick investors who invest in what you're looking at. Again, yours would be HR, what do they call it? Human, I don't know.
HR tech word. And ed.
Yeah, exactly.
And future of work too.
That's the word I was looking for. I was going to say human capital. And I'm like, no, that is not right. It is the future of work. But even then, did you fine tune it further to those within the list who invest in women?
We did also look at, are there female focused funds? Are there female led funds? Like, we definitely looked at that as well. And made sure they were on our list. If they weren't in that big list that we found, that one list, we had other lists we created from on a Google search, from talking to people, stepping back from doing the outreach of the list. ASU GSV Cup helped us create the structure, which was the base for a real pitch deck. So our brains got into the space, and then we could use that to talk to, like, we scoured our network. Who do we actually know who's a founder, who's maybe fundraised or maybe thought about fundraising? Let's talk to that, man or woman. Who do we know? Any VCs? Let's reach out to those people. Do we know any angel investors? So we looked across our networks and just reached out and tried to have those light conversations to build our understanding and feedback, of what worked, what didn't. And then when we really built the list, we had a pretty good sense, but we learned every day we sent an email or talked to somebody, we learned something new. And that's a big thing. We always are trying to remember, okay, what did we learn today and how do we apply it to tomorrow?
That is the perfect dovetail into my next point. So I'd like to look at your challenges and what you ladies might recommend for women that are thinking about fundraising and what challenges they might come up against and how to learn from it, but also maybe get ahead of it.
I think being able to articulate the problem very, very well, and then how you solve the problem very, very well is step one, because so many VCs, they might not be your target audience. We sell to C-suite people in the corporate world. So we sell to heads of talent, we sell to chief diversity officers, we sell to, presidents of business units. We don't sell to VCs. And so they don't necessarily intimately understand the problem that we are solving in terms of employee turnover, in terms of employee disengagement. So we had to be able to really clearly articulate what problem are we solving? How do we solve it? How do we solve it differently than everybody else or better than everybody else? And what's the scale of this solution? So first, be able to understand the problem and the solution. Second, I think we really were quite shocked that whilst we were solving a problem that we really felt passionate about, because women are woefully underrepresented in senior leadership, the female VCs that we spoke to, who focused on female founded businesses as their thesis, were actually the least supportive of any of the investors that we spoke to. That was a bit of a slap in the face. And it really surprised us. And it hurt to receive that feedback where they first didn't get it. They didn't understand our business model. And when we zoomed back out, we just recognized there are so few female VCs out there that they have, sadly, a lower appetite for risk. And so it wasn't about us. It wasn't personal. And we had to constantly depersonalize this, because you have to get really good at hearing no or being ghosted. I mean, hearing no is ideal because they at least get an answer, but often you just get ghosted. And being able to just depersonalize it is so important. And you get very good at developing a very thick skin pretty quickly. And then the last thing is, I think, just having a process that helps navigate those challenges, because you're going through a process. And to Kim's point, after every single call, we tweaked the language, we tweaked the pitch, we tweaked the messages. Oh, that one didn't land so well. Do you think it was them? Or do you think, this message really landed well? Let's make sure we include that next time. So we were constantly tweaking it, but we had a very clear process.
You made me think of an excellent point I want to dive into, which I think a fair amount of founders, when they think about fundraising, they don't realize when you're leading a company, but you're going to go after fundraising. Fundraising becomes almost your full-time job. So how did you ladies handle that aspect of it? Again, fundraising and taking the time to look at the lessons learned and look back on top of running the company.
And being parents and being wives. It's a whole other full-time job.
It's a lot. It's something we talk about, all the time. And at that time, that was one of the things we wrestled with. We are running a full scale business. We ended up raising a seed round, but this was not a pre-seed thought that we were pitching. We were running a full business that was running well, and it was big, and we were a tiny team, and we were managing a lot of things. And so we had to have that hard conversation of, oh my gosh, how are we actually going to fundraise on top of this and build those decks and have these phone calls and see our children and our husbands at night? I don't know. Did we have any good tips? We were, we do. We got very focused on what is the most important task. It's something we work on with our community. We talk about what can we delete from every day, every week, every month? What can we diminish doing? What can we delegate to others? Yes, whether that's, do we need to hire a contractor? Do we need to bring on an intern? Do we, so we got so focused on what was the most important thing in our week, our month, and day. We were very thoughtful in planning out okay, the next 3 months, this is what we got to get accomplished, and let's just nail how do we be super productive.
Such good advice. I think being organized is integral, and also being able to delegate. You're just going to have to learn that if you don't know it.
Yeah, and there, on that deleting things, recognizing saying no, what can you really say no to? And that could be in your personal life. I would love to participate, or I would love to be the room parent, but this year that doesn't work, right? And letting go of the feeling guilt around things of just right now, this is our priorities. And so that means when we say no, let's have a full body no or a full body yes on things, and not sort of sit here and agonize, because that's a lot of wasted energy too.
And, the other important piece to remember is it's not just running your business, but because you're fundraising, you actually have to be growing your business.
Oh, yeah.
And so, it wasn't just let's just keep the lights on while we go do this other thing. Our business had to grow as well. And so to Kim's point, we also had to look super critically each week of where is our energy, our time, going to be of most value and most impact in our business right now. And what we decided was we need to create raving fans and over deliver and over exceed the expectations of our clients and our members so that we can keep growing this business. Because if our clients are happy, if our members are happy, our business will grow. We don't have as much time to be doing hardcore business development while we're also doing fundraising. And so we wanted to be able to have our results speak for themselves with our clients, that they would then, recommend us to other clients, for example, but also that our bottom line was growing so that when we were going and pitching to VCs, we could show a trajectory of growth.
Do you feel like the journey of fundraising and growing a company and still being able to do the things you need to do as a mom, a wife, do you feel that having a co-founder has helped that?
100%.
Yeah, 100%. We both feel like it's a superpower, actually. Like the way that we're able to work together, we have different skill sets. We like to say it gives us the 360-degree view because we're looking at things differently. And so having that kind of relationship where we're constantly communicating, we're constantly talking. I mean, it is a marriage of some sort, right? It is a true partnership. And if you don't have, that means there's ups and downs, and you got to work through communication and tough times. And all of that makes it stronger and better. And yeah, absolutely.
And I think, I've experienced being a solo founder, and it's lonely. It's, the highs are high, the lows are very low. And so being able to have someone on that roller coaster with you, it's not only a partnership and a marriage, it's also therapy. And so, by the time I get home, Kim and I have already hashed out I wasn't expecting that. We've already hashed out that issue. I don't have to take work home with me as much as I would have otherwise, because I've already processed it in my conversations with Kim. We're able to vet ideas off each other, constantly bouncing ideas, and to Kim's point earlier, we're augmenting each other's perspectives. And so we can go so much further, so much faster because we're together.
Oh, I love that. It is hacking the patriarchy. Do you feel like you adjusted your process differently than you might have if you had been gentlemen, or having seen how some gentlemen raise money? And if you did, what would the advice for women doing it be around that?
That's a great question. I think we felt that we had to be even more prepared, right? So than most men. They might disagree. We felt like we had to be unbelievably prepared for every question, every angle. We saw a lot. Most people who raise VC funding, 98% are men. And so we saw a lot of men with ideas that were being funded, zero proof. Some of them may had, again, just the relationships and the networking to be able to do that and make it happen. We didn't graduate from Harvard. We don't have that sort of network in that world of founders and VCs. And then also, we just didn't have the relationships in general. I do think there is a bit of a difference there. We didn't mention earlier, but in the challenges, one of the things you got to recognize, it's very, very, very rare. I would say this. We are both married happily. We love men. We've got, great male friends. We have great VCs backing us that are men and women. But there are times, this does not happen to a man, where men say totally inappropriate things. One, they either treat you like a child, or we were on a Zoom call and heading to New York. He said, "Great, I can't wait to touch and feel you." And we said, "Excuse me? That's really inappropriate." We did meet this person in public or in person in New York. And it would we thought, oh, we're just overreacting. We were not overreacting. It was a completely inappropriate. And we have talked to other female founders that have also, we like to joke, one day we'll write a book or have a movie, but there are definitely some things that the men don't experience. And you just got to be really tough and not take it personally and move on.
And I think also just, we started to develop an attitude of, why not me? Why not us? We have a great business. We have a proven product. We have revenue. And so we just went into those meetings with, why not me? And if the person said this is not the right fit for me, we just moved on until we went to the next person. And, you have to get really good at hearing no. No doesn't mean failure. No means feedback. And it's just not the right fit for that particular VC. Also recognizing that getting a no is actually ideal, because so often you just get nothing. You get no feedback, you get ghosted, and get used to that as well. Just developing a thick skin. And I think we had to go into those conversations feeling over prepared with our facts, with our story, with our vision. At the stage of funding we were doing, seed funding, they're buying into the vision and the capabilities of you as founders. Later stage funding, it's more about the proof of the product and, the results you've had so far. But at that early stage, we realized how important we were to the success of that fundraising. And so we had to get really confident in our ability to execute.
So you guys touch on something. I've been in conversations with some amazing companies around gender bias in fundraising. Do you feel like you experienced a ton of bias? And yes, you were willing to call that person out. I wonder how many people would actually be willing to do that. Like, that's inappropriate. But how might you advise founders to address it?
Well, because we're two women, what we didn't experience was, which we do hear from others, so if Noah was a man and everybody in the room or in the Zoom meeting is just talking to Noah or asking Noah questions, that we hear happens often. We didn't have that. So there was a level playing field in terms of us two speaking. I think the biggest thing that came out sometimes was a bit of the like, oh, that's so cute, versus, wow, this is a serious idea, right? A big concept. I think there was like a little bit of that. Again, we also talked to because we talked to a lot of people, many wonderful investors who were interested, just weren't the right fit for us. But I don't know, Noah, do you have some thoughts?
I mean, I think just realizing you can't make it personal and just move on. If that person says something inappropriate, they're not the right fit. And so just move on. I think sticking to the facts, and telling the story, be gracious and move on. You don't want to create a scene and make that person feel bad and, look like an idiot themselves, even though they might be. I think just be gracious and kind of end the conversation swiftly and move on. I think that's just the best way to handle it, is just cut it short and move on.
And actually what Noah was just saying about the different people is, it's really important to remember, you're going after funding. You can get a little anxious and almost desperate, like, we really want this money. Sometimes you really feel you need this money because you might have to shut down your company, right? There are a lot of people raising money in that situation. We happen to be very lucky. That was not the case, but you can get anxious. And I think the most important advice is, these investors are people you want to be friends with as well. Like, you need to respect and like each other on a professional level. Sometimes it can be more of a friendship too, but like, it is very important that it's not just that they get your business, but that you trust them and that you want to work with them. And you should remember that, like, you want to stay in control of that, and like, you are part of this. You are not just like, oh, thank you for the money, I'll do whatever. Like, it is a partnership, and they're only getting a piece of your company too at the early stages. And remember that you're still in charge. It's your business, not theirs.
You answered my next question in advance. I was going to ask, when you are desperate for money, what does that look like? So you already went there. Thank you for that, getting ahead. So going back to your previous point, which was how many investors you talk to and how you ladies build relationships. Network in fundraising is so important. So this question will be two-part. One is, are you still building relationships in the prospect of raising another round? And then for those that have never done it, what advice you might have on building those relationships and building that network to go after fundraising?
To answer the first question, no, we're not currently actively building relationships in the investor space. That being said, we still, when we have the opportunity to connect with VCs who are further down the line, we just had a virtual coffee with someone who's a Series A investor just last week. And it was really, connecting and getting advice and getting insights and just staying relevant and top of mind. It's authentic and organic as opposed to we need to be building relationships so that we can fundraise. And that is always the best way to do it. I think, building relationships for relationship's sake rather than transaction's sake. So if you are fundraising, I think being able to be authentic and building relationships that feel organic as much as possible rather than just transactional, ideally. But that being said, if you are fundraising, you also have to be transactional. So finding the right balance, sending articles that are interesting, just staying, pinging people on LinkedIn to connect with them and, congratulating them on closing funding in some other business that you read about. So things that are not just making asks all the time. One of our coaches in Kahila once said that, building relationships is like having a bank account. You have to make deposits before you can make withdrawals. And so I think it's a really good way to think about, you've got to be sort of building goodwill before you can take a withdrawal out. And then, just connecting with people on an individual level as much as possible. When we were having those calls, it was, oh, that's an interesting Zoom background that you have. Like if they have a guitar behind them, you're asking them about, are you in a band? You're trying to connect with people on a human level as quickly as possible. And that does help build relationships.
Excellent. Excellent. Going back to the cold emails to that list. In my fundraising experience, or at least in the conversations I've been in, there have been a fair amount of that will get you somewhere, but really it's those warm intros. How much of your success in the beginning was cold, if you had a percentage, I don't know if you do, but of cold emails versus like warm intros, and how you might get those warm intros?
Well, we might have a slightly different story. I mean, it was mostly cold, and our two big investors receive those original cold emails separately. And then they do a lot of work together and they talked about it. And they were like, we were so impressed with this email. So it absolutely works. And what we found is that network, the investing network and VC network is quite small, especially if you're at a specific round. All the seed VCs kind of know each other, at least loosely, right? Or some. And so there was, as we were sending out tons of these cold emails, they talk about deals and they talk about like interesting things that are popping up. So it truly did work for us. I'm trying to think back on, we did so much cold outreach. It's hard to remember who was actually a warm.
Very few of the people.
It was very few.
Warm. But I will say, again, we had a process in that cold email. So by that point, we had really clearly nailed our story. We had won awards. We led with the awards that we'd won, the companies we worked with, the results that we'd achieved with those companies, the size of the market, the solution that we had to the problem. And it was very clearly, it was bullet pointed of the story and why they should invest in us, why they should get on the phone with us. We did the work for them in that cold email. It wasn't just, hi, you look nice. Do you want to get on a call with us?
Yeah, we spent a lot of time structuring that email. And again, that came from having built that original ASU GSV Cup proposal and pitch deck, continuing to refine it. How do we put that into an email that someone would, in the first sentence, look at and go, whoa, I'm going to keep reading. This is interesting. So what would catch their eye? And then that process really, really worked for us. Many of those that we reached out to then did make warm intros to some other companies. So it kind of went from the cold, those people then connected us warmly to others. And, if we've met a lot of investors who do Series A, those have all been warm intros to date. And so as Noah was saying, continue to, while we're not fundraising currently, make sure we have those relationships. We know them kind of every now and then, touch base. And so that we're definitely at that. It'll be harder to do cold today at this stage than in the past.
I want to take a moment to thank you, ladies, because that was so insightful for the listeners. Literally that process And even breaking down what you included in the email is so important, because you're right. I absolutely have seen emails like, hey, this is what I have. Are you interested? Or pitch deck attached. Give us a call. And so laying that out is super, super helpful for our listeners. I like to wrap the show up with the top 3 hacks our guests might give to the audience on the topic at hand. So do you ladies have 3 top hacks for women looking to jump into the fundraising game?
I would say the first one is get very confident about your story. Know your story, be able to tell your story, why you created the company, why you care about the problem, why you're the right people to solve the problem. Really, the story.
My number 2 would be build the list of companies, investors you think you want to work with, and then rank them, right? Based on what you know today. Who's your ideal? Who's like would be great? Who's like, I don't know. And then you flip that list over and you want to start with the least likely to invest in you and those you probably don't care so much about. And that's who you want to reach out to first. And so you start with those, like you are practicing your pitch. Like when we had 60 different conversations, we were incredible by probably 35. But those beginning ones are really
the first
rough.
5 were embarrassing.
Terrible. We would get off and we're like, that was so bad. So it's really important. Do not call your first choice investors until you are really prepared.
Oh, brilliant. Do you ladies have a third?
I think really get confident in the facts. Like know your business metrics inside and out. And that then helps you build your confidence being in those conversations where, self-doubt creeps in, you lean on the facts.
Yeah. Yes. Numbers are very important in those meetings. So that's part of the facts. You need to seriously just memorize and be able to spout them off in the middle of those, any pitch meeting, and be confident. Even if you mess up, be confident in what you said.
Well, this has been so incredibly insightful. And I cannot thank you ladies enough for jumping on and giving so much insight, so much good, juicy information for our listeners looking to dive into fundraising. Thank you so much, ladies.
You're so welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. That was a lot of fun.
Thank you so much for tuning in and listening to today's episode. For all the juicy deets on this episode, be sure to check out our show notes or give us a holler on Instagram at Hacking the Patriarchy Podcast. And if you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support this podcast, don't be shy. Please share it with your friends. Sharing is caring after all. Lastly, if you'd like to lend your personal support, please take a moment to tell the world about it with a review on your favorite streaming platform. We'd be forever grateful. Tune in again soon to enjoy a brand new episode of the Hacking the Patriarchy podcast. And until next time, keep on hacking, my friends. If you've made it this far, I have one more little thing to share with you. Did you know that this isn't my only feminist endeavor? That's right, there's more. I run a media startup dedicated to providing the most current and pertinent news about women, for women, and by women. Our mission centers on delivering a platform where the latest updates regarding women-led initiatives are extensively covered, highlighting women's actions, accomplishments, perspectives, and other elements that profoundly influence women's lives and contribute to meaningful progress. I invite you to head over to femled.news to learn more.